So we're going to go ahead and move forward and talk about the competitions. Now, competitions can be set up and also facilitated with or without a participant list. So if you're using a participant list, the advantage of running competitions is that you can assign each one of your students ahead of time to a particular team. Now, if you're not going to be using a participant list, you can still run competitions, but you would need to do a couple extra things within your presentation to assign those teams. So I'm going to first of all talk about setting up competitions if you are using a participant list, and then I'm going to go ahead and discuss if you are not using a participant list. So if you're using a participant list and you want to go ahead and set up teams, well, if you didn't create the list, you can do it from scratch through the participant list wizard. And if you've already created the list, you can assign those teams by editing your participant list. I'll talk about putting in the teams from scratch and then editing them. So if I need to build a participant list from scratch, you should know that we're going to the participant list wizard, and we're going to go through a series of 5 steps. Step number 1 was that template. Step number 2 was our list fields. And step number 3, if you're in my new user class, you remember that I skipped this step because this is where we add groups that will assign teams for competitions and also groups for tracking demographical information. Well, we're going to get to the demographical information next topic, but for right now we want to assign teams ahead of time. So let's say I wanted a blue team, I added in there. I want a red team, and I also want a yellow team. So I have my 3 teams in there, and I can have as many as I want. But if you do notice, right below where I added those team names in, I have text which reads, check the groups that you wish to be included in a team competition. Well, I absolutely am interested in using blue, red, and yellow for teams. Therefore, I'm going to check mark all 3 of these boxes. Click Next, name the list, and then when you get to your final step where you add in the student information, you just simply check mark the box of the team you want that student to belong to. And we would do that for every single person in that list. Move down to the lower right-hand corner, click the Done tab, and now those teams are part of your participant list. Now, just because you've assigned teams within the participant list doesn't mean you ever have to run a competition. But if you ever do run a competition, well, you've already pre-assigned the teams, which makes the process pretty easy. Now, if you've already created a participant list, you're going to need to go ahead and edit the list to add the teams. So to edit a participant list, you're going to click on your Participants tab, and you're going to go to the 4th option, which reads Edit a Participant List. So when I click on this, I can go ahead and scroll over and find the list that I want to edit. So we'll open up this one right here, and you can see right now that there is currently no teams in this list, so I want to add them. To do this, I'm going to click my Edit button in the upper left-hand corner. And from the Edit, I get a drop-down, and I'm going to scroll to the only location that has an arrow, which is Add Field/Group. And from here, I'm going to go ahead and add a group. So we have the same little screen that we saw when we went through the participant list wizard. So from here, I can put in my blue team, my red, and also my yellow. And very, very important is that we check mark the boxes. Click Finish, and it's the same thing. Check mark the box that we want that individual to belong to. Any questions in terms of just assigning teams within the participant list? Now let's talk about actually building presentations in which we incorporate competitions. Now if you click on your Insert Slide tab, notice how there's lines within this Insert Slide drop-down. There are horizontal lines. It's basically just separating categories. So from the Team Assignment slide down to the Wager slide, these are your competition slides. So we're going to go ahead and talk about these step by step. Now, I did mention that none of this is systematic, none of this is presented really logically because there is no step 1 and a final step. But in terms of creating presentations in which you incorporate competitions, you want to do it in the logical progression that I present. So first of all, if you're using a participant list, you assign those teams. And then you make the decision that you want to go ahead and incorporate a competition within a presentation. So if that's the case, and you're using a participant list, the first thing that we have in here is a team assignment slide. Think about the words here, team assignment slide. Well, we've already assigned our teams to each individual, so this is going to be completely unnecessary. We don't need a team assignment slide because those teams have already been pre-assigned within the list. So therefore, we're going to bypass this. Now, before we start putting in these different leaderboard slides, we have to go ahead and add our questions in. So we're going to go ahead and insert our questions, type out the questions, put in the answer choices, and very, very important is that we assign correct answers for these questions. Think about it. We're trying to run a competition. Well, how could we have a competition if there's no correct answers on any of these slides. Because if there's no correct answers, there's no points to be gained. So make sure that when you build your question slides, you are assigning correct answer choices, because that's where the points are coming from for this competition. So the first step, put your question slides in there, set correct answers. After you do this, you're going to come back up to the Insert Slide tab, and you're just going to decide where and when within this presentation you want to show your students both the team scores as well as their individual scores. So you can have a team and an individual competition within the same presentation. You're just going to add scoreboard slides. So if I insert this team leaderboard slide, notice how it's just another slide that gets built into this presentation. Now when I run this presentation live, it's going to go ahead and automatically generate the current team score at this time in the presentation. I don't have to customize this slide, because where it reads team 1 through 5, it's going to go ahead and automatically take on the team names that I've assigned from within the list. And over there on the left-hand side, it will also automatically generate that current team score at that time in the presentation. Now I do want to take just a moment to talk about how these team scores are generated. So let's say I put this team scoreboard slide after my first question, the first question I asked in the presentation, and that question was worth 10 points. And let's say I have two teams, a blue team and a red team. The blue team has 20 people on it, and the red team has 10 people on it. So it seems like we have a pretty large difference between the two teams. Now, if the question is worth 5 points, in order for the blue team, who has 20 people on it, to get all 5 points, all 20 people on the team need to get the question correct. For the red team, who only has 10 people on it, in order for them to get all 5 points, all 10 people must get the question correct. So it's just taking a percentage of how many people on the team got the question correct to actually assign the points. That's how these team scores are generated. So technically, the team with the least amount of people would actually have the biggest advantage, because there's always a maximum amount of points that can be gained from a particular question. How are we doing so far, guys? Any questions in terms of assigning teams, putting the correct answers on the questions, or inserting these team scoreboard slides? Now, do keep in mind the team scoreboard slide is going to be inserted as many times as you want. So if you want to show the updated team score after every single question slide, then you're just going to make sure that you insert this ahead of time after every single question slide. If you just want to put it in one time at the very end of the presentation, well, that's exactly what you do. Now, another option that we have here is a participant leaderboard. Participant leaderboard works the same exact way as the team leaderboard in terms of automatically generating the updated score. In this case, it's going to be the updated participant score. So since in this environment we're going to be using a participant list where it says participant 1 through 5, it's going to actually give us that participant's name. So it will show us their name right here. And it will show us their updated points at that time in the presentation. Nothing needs to be done from you as a presenter for anything to generate here. It will automatically generate when this comes up in the presentation. So this is your participant scoreboard. Just like the team scoreboard, build this in as often as it is. You want to show those participants the updated score at that time. Any questions on the participant scoreboard? Another option that we have here is a team MVP slide. This, of course, is an additional option. Team MVP slide is something that probably should go at the end of your presentation, although it doesn't necessarily need to be. But every team has a most valuable player, whether that team came in first place or last place. Down below there, it's going to show you who the person was where it says participants. It'll show you what team they were from, but also the points that were generated. Now, of course, since we're going to be using a participant list, it will give you their name where it says participants. And absolutely nothing is done by you as a presenter to generate anything here. Software automatically does it. The next option is a fastest responder slide. Now, the fastest responder slide is not a scoreboard. But what this will show us is from the previous Turning Point question asked, who got the question correct, and also who got the question correct in the fastest amount of time. So if it's myself and, let's say, Shirley, we're in the competition. And Shirley chimes in from the previous question in 2.57 seconds, and she was correct. But I chimed in 3.10 seconds, but I'm incorrect. Since I'm an incorrect responder, even though I'm faster, my name is going to be nowhere to be found on this fastest responder slide. Shirley was the fastest, and she was also correct. So her name is going to be on the slide, and just to the left will be 5 points, whatever it was that I said, but it will always be to the 100th place. So if it was 5.27, it's going to be 5.27 to the left. Questions at all on Team MVP or the fastest responder?
Nope.
All right, guys, so what I'm going to do is go ahead. Actually, excuse me, I got one more within here I want to show you, and that is the wager slide. Now, the wager slide, just as it reads, allows your individuals to go ahead and wager or do a little bit of gambling their total current points on the very next question. So this is for individual points. So basically, if I'm sitting with 100 points, I wager 25% of those, and I get the question wrong, I'm down to 75 points. Okay, so the wager slide is always going to apply to the very next turning point question. Now, in terms of best practices, it's a good idea to put an individual scoreboard slide in right before this one so everybody can see how many points they currently have. Then show this slide, bring up the question, and then it's not a bad idea after the question to put in another individual scoreboard so everyone can see how many points they gained and or lost. Questions at all on the wager slide? All right, now I do want to go ahead and recap setting up competitions if you're using a participant list, and then we're going to jump over if you're not using a list. So if you're using a participant list, make sure when you get to that group step that you are making sure that you check mark those boxes. Can't emphasize that enough, because if you're not check marking the boxes, you're not using those groups for competitions. You're actually using those to track demographic information. After you do this, when you're building your presentation, you're just going to make sure that you have question slides in there and you set correct answer choices. This is very, very important that you set the correct answer choices, because if you don't, then there's no points to be gained. Now afterwards, we're going to come up here to the Insert Slide tab, and we're just going to decide where and when within the presentation we want to show those students both the team score and the individual score, and we're going to build these scoreboard slides in whenever we want to. It's up to us. Okay, if we want to show it after every single slide, we do that, or just one time to show a final score, it's up to you. Remember, the team assignment slide is not going to be necessary because you've already inserted the teams ahead of time. Team MVP slide is something that will show you the most valuable player from every single team. Fastest responder, not a scoreboard, but it will show us who's the fastest responder to the previous turning point question. And then the wager slide is something that will allow individuals to wager a certain percentage of their individual points on the next question. And yes, I am bypassing the racing leaderboards. They are not actually a game. All they are is just leaderboard slides that show balloons levitating across the screen, as well as horses kind of levitating as well. And yeah, I guess unless you're working with maybe second graders, it's probably not going to be too impressive to really anybody. That's why I normally don't show it in a training class, but it is there as an option. But basically, it's not a race. All it is a scoreboard. All right, so now I want to go ahead and change gears and talk about if you're not going to be using a participant list. So if you're not going to be using your participant list and you still want to run both team and individual competitions, when you're building your presentation, even before you start building in your question slides, one of the first things you want in that presentation is this team assignment slide. The team assignment slide will allow each student in your class to choose a team to be on for the remainder of the presentation. So let's say that Deb and I both picked we're on Team 2. We're going to be on Team 2 for the remainder of this presentation because we both hit button number 2. Now this slide can be completely customized. So it doesn't have to say please select a team, and you can also have up to 10 teams. But all the things on here are customized. We can represent the team names with whatever it is we want to. But remember, however the students answer this question is what team they're going to be placed on for the remainder of the presentation. Everything else is the same. Build in your question slide, set correct answers, put in your scoreboard slides, team MVP, fastest responder, the whole deal. But think about this. If I come to this participant scoreboard slide, if I'm using a participant list, it's going to show me the student's name. But in this case, I'm not using a participant list. But it can still identify who a student is via the device ID found on the back of the response card. Now, I've been in many situations where I've given live presentations and run competitions, and barely ever do I actually use a participant list. It is no problem for people to turn over to the back of their card, find their device ID, and match it up with what they see on the screen. It's usually very seamless, and it still adds to that engagement interactivity, and people still have a blast with it. That's going to be the same thing also for the team MVP slide, where it says participant. It's going to be represented with the device ID, and also for the fastest responder, once again, it will be device ID. So the big difference between running a competition with and without a participant list is if we're not using a participant list, we're going to put in the team assignment slide, and when we come to these individual scoreboards, it's going to show us device ID instead of the student's name. Are there any questions at all in terms of running competitions?
No.
No, I don't think so.
Okay.